Hello guys, and welcome to part 2 of this Sonic the Hedgehog palette panic video. If you haven't watched part 1 of this video yet, I would suggest you go back and watch part 1, as what we discussed in that video was how we took the background layer from the Mega Drive version of Green Hill Zone and converted it to run on the Amiga by displaying the background as a wall of 64 pixel wide hardware sprites and reducing the Mega Drive's palette from 20 colours down to a 16 colour Amiga friendly palette to use with those sprites. So in today's video, what I'm going to be going through is how we took the Mega Drive's foreground layer and all the elements that would be displayed also in that foreground layer, things like the Mega Drive sprites, the tile map, and anything that Sonic really interacts with as you play the game. These will be displayed on the Amiga using a 32 colour palette, which is independent from the 16 colour palette that is being used by the Amiga's hardware sprites to display the background layer. So as you can see on screen, we're going to start where we left off in part 1. We can currently see the Amiga version of the Green Hill Zone background layer. So what we'll do first is we'll bring in a portion of the Green Hill Zone foreground layer, which I've previously populated with objects and enemies which basically cover all the colours that are used in the Mega Drive's palette for Green Hill Zone. Next up, let's display the 4 16 colour Mega Drive palettes that are used in Green Hill Zone so we can see the full range of colours used in the level. Now, as you can see in this 64 colour Mega Drive palette, there are a fair few colours duplicated here across the palette lines. Straight away I can see there's at least 4 whites here, the greys are duplicated, there's a couple of yellows, there's 2 greens that are duplicated, there are also 2 reds. So there are quite a lot of duplicate colours in these palettes. Why would you need these colours duplicated across the palette lines at all? Well, there's actually a really good example on this screen right at the moment. Let's freeze all the items on the screen so that they stop animating. And let's also fade out our background layer so that we can focus on what colours are going to be changed and what we're working on, so there's nothing distracting us. Now let's put our attention on the sunflower at the right hand side of the screen here. You'll notice that the top of the stem of the sunflower is using the yellows from the petals of the sunflower instead of the greens from the stem graphics. This is because the graphics on the Mega Drive are displayed in 8x8 pixel tiles, and because the Mega Drive's 64 colours are actually split into 4 individual 16 colour palettes, this tile that contains the bottom of the petals and the top of the stem of the sunflower are using the colours from palette row 1. And as you can see, palette row 1 only has light greens, which are a mismatch to the colours used in the rest of the stem, and the darker yellows from the yellow colour ramp, which are used in the sunflower petals. Now, why might I be mentioning this in particular? The reason is that because of the way the Amiga works, our foreground layer has access to a shared 32 colour palette, meaning that little instances like this that can't be fixed on the Mega Drive without some serious palette reconstruction, we can actually fix little issues like this that will appear throughout the Mega Drive graphics going forward. So basically, with a few clicks of the mouse, we can repair this stem and recolour it the green that the rest of the stem uses. I know this is only a minor change and doesn't add that much to the game overall, but little wins like this over time will add up and help to give the Amiga version its own identity. And now that we've got that little informational detour out of the way, let's get back to our original Mega Drive palette. And let's now overlay what colours are actually being used by the foreground layer, and let's get rid of the colours that aren't being used at all. And as we can see, all 4 palette lines are being used, and a whopping 40 colours are being used in the foreground layer. Somehow we got to take these 40 Mega Drive colours and squeeze them into a single 32 colour palette for the Amiga. So let's bring up a bespoke 40 colour palette for the Mega Drive so we can see all the colours together, not sort of scattered across the different palette lines that the Mega Drive uses. And at the same time, let's also get rid of our original 4 palette lines that the Mega Drive uses so we can clear the space a bit and gain a little bit of clarity back with what we're dealing with here. Now let's also give ourselves a nice, fresh, empty 32 colour palette for the Amiga. We'll place that just above the Mega Drive palette, and this is what we need to aim for. Now, just like in the previous video, there are some colours in these palettes that we absolutely cannot touch, and they will need to be locked into our Amiga palette from the get-go. The first of these are the watercolours. You can see them here cycling round and round, which basically creates the animation for the waterfalls that are dotted throughout Green Hill Zone. These can't be used anywhere else because anything that you colour with one or any number of these 4 blues will actually end up flashing as each colour rotates over the slot you're using for whatever item you've coloured in that slot. So these are non-negotiable. Let's pull them up into our Amiga palette and lock them in place. There's also one other colour in the Mega Drive palette which we cannot touch, and that is the blue at the top left hand side of the Mega Drive palette. This is essentially the transparent colour. It's the colour that's used for any transparent pixels in any sprites or any object basically that appears in the foreground. The Amiga also needs its own transparent colour for its objects and for its tile map graphics. So essentially this colour will serve the exact same purpose in the Amiga palette as it does in the Mega Drive palette. So let's lock that one in place and pull it up into our Amiga palette. Now that's the hard locked colours in place. We can now see that we've got 27 free slots in our Amiga palette that we now have to fit 35 Mega Drive colours into. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to delete 8 of these Mega Drive colours so that the remaining 27 Mega Drive colours can be pushed into our Amiga palette. So I want to turn your attention now to the vast amount of greens we have in the Mega Drive palette at the moment. You can see the top right hand corner, we've got a sort of pale set of greens which are used in places like the centre of the sunflower, and more importantly as the main colours for the green neutron enemy, which you can see in the bottom left hand corner of the screen just underneath Sonic there. And also we have the sort of more vibrant green colours in the middle of the bottom row there, just next to the water cycle colours. These greens are used in the grass and the trees and places like that, the more prominent in your face areas of the game. I think we have to keep those. So let's go strong. Let's lock in the more vibrant grassy and tree greens into our Amiga palette, and let's drop our pale greens that are used in more sparse locations like the green neutron and the sunflower heads. And just like in the previous video, we're going to fill any pixel that's got its palette colour removed with this bright pink to highlight what changes we've made so far. Okay, that's a really good start. That's 5 colours down. We've only got 3 to go. So next, let's turn our attention to the sort of left side of the Mega Drive palette. We can see that there is a black next to that row of blues, and there's another really dark colour, a dark brown, which is used in the checkerboard pattern in the Green Hill Zone tile map. Now, because these colours are so similar, I think what we're going to do is we're going to delete the black, quite simply because when we get a little bit further down in this process and we find substitutes for the colours we've deleted further along, I'm going to aim to merge these 2 colours. So I'm just going to pick the black at random, and when we get a little bit further down the line, we'll blend the black and the brown together to fill the objects that are using these two palette colours. Now, before we have to make our last difficult colour change in this palette, we can see that there are basically two colours which are almost identical. There are two yellows. They are very, very close together in their colour values there. There's a really bright yellow at the far right of the palette, and there's also a sort of slightly paler yellow. Now this paler yellow, the only place it's really used is in small highlights on certain sprites throughout the level, and these sprites are things like the bridge, which we can see here next to Sonic in the middle of the screen. You can see there's a very slight yellow highlight in these logs here. Now, because the bright yellow is used for things like the signs, the ring, and the buzz bomber shots that you can see next to him, I'm going to keep the brighter yellow. So let's remove the slightly darker yellow from the Mega Drive palette. Okay, so far so good. We've got one more colour that we need to remove. So which area of the palette are we going to look to remove a colour from? Now, looking at the current colours that are left in the Mega Drive palette, we have a nice blue colour ramp to the top left of the Mega Drive palette there, which is used by Sonic himself and pretty much every enemy except for the green neutron in Green Hill Zone. And also to the bottom right of the Mega Drive palette, there is a smaller purple colour ramp, which is used pretty much only in the purple flowers that you see dotted next to the sunflowers in Green Hill Zone. So what we're going to rely on here is an old trick where we delete one of the colours from the purple ramp and kind of ramp those into a portion of the blue ramp that Sonic and the enemies are using on Green Hill Zone. But what we need to decide on is which of these colours in the purple ramp we're going to delete. Because this is a sort of consistent colour ramp where the colour just goes from dark to light and doesn't change its hue much, we can't really delete a middle colour from the ramp. So basically we've either got to delete the darkest colour of the purple ramp or the lightest colour of the purple ramp, so that remaining colours can sort of flow more seamlessly into the blues used by Sonic. So let's isolate both the brightest purple and the darkest purple in that purple ramp. And let's first take the highlight colour and let's run it along Sonic's blues. And as you can see, really the brightest purple is too bright for any of the blues used by Sonic. So let's leave the brightest purple of the purple ramp where it is, and let's now try checking the darkest purple against Sonic's blues. The colour it most closely resembles is the second lightest blue in Sonic's blue ramp. So let's get rid of the darkest purple in the purple ramp, and now we pretty much have our 27 Mega Drive colours that we can now fit into our Amiga palette. So this will be quite satisfying. Let's lock all the remaining colours from the Mega Drive palette into our Amiga palette. Now at this point we can remove the Mega Drive palette. We don't really need to see it anymore, so let's get rid of that. We now have a fairly robust 32 colour palette for the Amiga version, but from our palette reductions we can see a hell of a lot of empty pink pixels at the moment. So let's now repaint these pink areas by selecting some substitute colours from our current Amiga palette. So the first colour, the missing black, we know that we were going to replace that with the dark brown from the checkerboard pattern in the level tiles. Now we can see Sonic looks quite normal there, as does the Buzz Bomber, and it's quite a subtle change that you don't really notice that much. Next, I'd like to fix the missing purple. This was visible in the rocks to the left underneath Sonic there, and in the flower to the right next to the sunflower. We decided that we were going to change this colour to the second lightest blue in Sonic's blues, so let's see what that looks like. And again, I think you'll agree that this is quite a subtle change, not too noticeable in the grand scheme of things. Next, let's replace the missing dark yellow that was visible in the bridge. We were going to substitute this with the brighter yellow that is in the signs and in the rings, etc. So let's do that now. Now, I will admit this change does look a little bit more drastic than the other changes we've made so far. The yellow in the bridge really kind of pops out now and doesn't complement the other bridge colours. So this is something we'll address right at the end of the video with some colour mixing. But for now, I think that change is serviceable and looks okay. Now, our final 5 colour changes are all part of the same change because they form the light green ramp that we saw in the green neutron at the bottom left of the screen underneath Sonic there. This will be the most drastic change in the entire level, but to some degree I think it's actually a change for the better. Let's see if you agree. What we're going to do is we're going to replace the pale greens that were in the green neutron with the grassy green ramp that we kept for the foreground tiles. So let's do that now. And as you can see there, we've replaced the first 4 pale greens with the 4 greens from the grass green colour ramp. You may notice that we haven't changed the 5th colour because obviously we don't have a green to replace it with. This colour that is left over actually forms the little spine on the top of his fin on his head, which was the brightest pale green in that colour ramp. But I think what we're just going to do is replace this colour with the colour that the blue neutron uses for its ridge of its fin. So let's do that now. And there we go guys, that's it. Those are the remixed colours for the Amiga version. Personally, I think the green neutron actually looks better in these vibrant greens. He's got more contrast with the background now, and if we quickly compare and contrast between the original Mega Drive colours and these current Amiga colours, I think you'll agree that the colour changes aren't that noticeable. The main areas I notice is in the sunflower, because we're now using the brighter greens or the more vibrant greens in the middle of the sunflower, whereas they were more pale greens. And the highlights in the bridge now look a little bit overbearing, they stick out a little bit too much for my liking. So we could stop there, but let's take advantage of the Amiga's 24-bit colour space and do some colour mixing to try and balance everything out. Now I can't really adjust the greens because that will mess with the look of the level a little bit too much, but we can balance these yellows out a little bit to try and get the bridge back to where it was without making too many changes to the rings and the signs and everything like that. So let's bring up another 16 colour Amiga palette with those balancing changes done. And let's now apply those changes to our graphics. Now this is a really subtle change, but it's the final change in our Amiga palette. Let's now bring back our background layer and remove our Amiga palettes so we can see what our final colour choices look like for Green Hill Zone on the Amiga. And just for some extra clarity, let's now compare and contrast the original Mega Drive background layer and foreground layer objects with our new Amiga version. So that's it guys, that's all done. Let me know in the comments what you think about the changes I've made for the Amiga version of Sonic. Give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down, and if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you on the next update.